Thanks so much for joining us for Frameline44 Spotlight on Taiwan panel. Additional support for our spotlight tonight is brought to you by Ministry of Culture, Taiwan Academy in Los Angeles. Here with us today for our spotlight is Jay Lin, producer of Taiwan Equals Love, and Ming Lang Chen, who's the director of The Teacher. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll begin with questions for Jay and Taiwan Equals Love. Jay, thanks so much for the film, the documentary. It's so incredible, so enlightening to follow the journey of these families. The film was released about a year after marriage equality had passed in Taiwan. And so we're treated with 3 different LGBTQ families with very different backgrounds in the film. And it does an incredible job documenting their personal struggles, their happiness, but most important of all, their fight for equality within the 3 years it took to film this documentary. How were the families selected? It just seemed like it was a perfect pick. All their stories came together to showcase, this very historic moment for Taiwan.
Okay, so first of all, thank you, Michelle, and everybody who is tuning in on Frameline. I'm actually an early immigrant to, when I was young, at 10, I moved to California and actually studied in Bay Area, and so went to Frameline several times. So it's great that I'm able to be part of this. As to your question, like most documentaries, it didn't always turn out with like a full-on script. But what happened in 2016 was that I and Gaga Ulala, it's a streaming service that I founded, got involved with the Marriage Equality Coalition in Taiwan. So we became one of the 5 founding members of the Marriage Equality Coalition because the discussion on same-sex marriage was getting really heated in 2016. And with most documentaries, I knew I had immense access because I was in these rooms discussing with other activists, legislators, the LGBT community about how to work together to coalesce the coalition to pass the bill. And so immediately I asked my team to follow me or follow other activists and legislators around. And so by the end of 2016, we had already amassed quite a lot of footage. And we began wondering, okay, what can we do with this footage? Do we want to make a historical documentary? It seemed like there was so much news services and television channels that were reporting on this in depth. And so we felt that if we were telling a historical documentary, maybe there isn't that sort of like uniqueness or that personal touch. And so we started pivoting on what could be a suitable documentary that can really showcase to Taiwan and the rest of the world what is happening, but with a heart. And since I was involved in the push for same-sex marriage, and I knew a lot of actual individuals and couples who were fighting just as hard as us, I looked around and saw potentially the formation of these main characters that would comprise of 3 different generations and going through different stages of their lives, but all trying to fight for marriage equality because it would dramatically and significantly impact their happiness, their security, and their legal protection in this country. And so we eventually found the 3 couples, the older couple who are going through potential sort of inheritance or disease, illness issues, and a couple in their 30s and 40s, trying to be co-parents to their child, and the young couple who are trying to start a business together. And so because they knew that we were heavily involved in the coalition and promoting same-sex marriage, it was quite easy for them to agree for us to follow them around for the last 2-3 years.
You mentioned earlier being a part of also the Bay Area. Here in America, at least, we know that sharing our authentic stories as LGBTQ people, it's highly effective. I mean, for the United States back in 2015 and prior to that, there were many even statewide battles that we had lost, and we learned from them that what was most effective was sharing these types of stories, these very personal stories. There's a particular and nuanced focus, though, on family traditions with Taiwan Equals Love. Each of the featured families were able to convey the importance of their right to their families, whether it was the lesbian couple raising a child or the young couple that you had mentioned, starting a business together, but would be considered transnational and they're fighting to just physically being together, or the elderly couple going through some health complications. And so they're thinking about their future and inheritance. And if one, left the other, what life would be like. And so the question is, how do you think this resonated with Taiwanese families, and from the cultural perspective, the importance of families in Taiwanese culture?
So in short, it's very important. I myself am also a gay dad to two twin boys. And I can say part of my fervent sort of participation in the coalition and in marriage equality the last 3 years was because I knew my life was also at stake, and the protection for my children and the equality that I wanted to achieve for my particular family was at stake. So you're absolutely right in saying that there was a very strong sort of connection to family. And actually in Asian cultures, especially in Chinese cultures, family is a very close unit. And so if we are able to, with this documentary, get families to start talking together, and for the parents who maybe can relate to the older generation gay couple that we had, or for the younger children to relate to the transnational couple who are fresh off college, and one moved from Macau to be with the other one to start a business together and pursue their future together. And of course, with Jovi and Mindy, how to fight for the right and the well-being for their daughter, which is what I would also want for my two twin boys. I think that type of story would really kind of resonate not only to Taiwan, but also specifically to other parts of Asia. Because in the last 3 years, when we were fighting for marriage equality in Taiwan, we used a lot of references, whether those are films or legislation or case studies from Europe, from the US, from Australia. And a lot of the feedback that we got from people is, oh, these are all Western society sort of historical, political, social, cultural developments. It doesn't really apply to Asia. So same-sex marriage is not going to work here because Asia has different culture, different society, different framework as to what a family is. But Taiwan is a testament that equality should prevail globally, whether it's in the East or in the West, whether it's in Asia or anywhere else in this world. And so I think we have convincingly made that statement through the passage of the legislation. And I hope that this documentary is going to be viewed by the Taiwanese people and by the rest of the world as a testament to that. So when other Asian countries or other countries in the world that are also trying to achieve marriage equality, and there are anti-gay or opposition that stake the same issue, like I had just mentioned earlier, I hope that they can just very convincingly show them this film and have that speak for itself.
Yeah, I'm going to add a quick question here, just because that scene when everyone's standing in the rain and we're waiting for the decision from lawmakers, and then it comes out that indeed marriage equality has passed in Taiwan, making it the first Asian country to do so. Can you describe kind of what that feeling was? I think for us as the people who had seen it, yes, it's emotional for us, and we're crying, with everyone who's crying. But your own words as the person, behind this film and putting this together, documenting this history happening.
So obviously that was a very emotional and significant event, and a day that I'll always remember, because the 3 years of fighting for the passage of same-sex marriage wasn't kind of like a straight line. It was a very emotional up and down roller coaster. It wasn't like a straight through, kind of like a bill through legislature and voted by a majority. It was the legislative process. It was judicial interpretation. There was also a referendum which the pro-gay camp lost significantly. So it was extremely set back, and followed by tons of different gatherings in the hundreds of thousands of people in front of the presidential hall, in front of the legislative hall. And so to the very end, we did not know exactly what the votes were going to be. And so I think everybody's heartbeats were pumping very high. And I think the rain just added to that drama. But actually the rain also signifies kind of like the happiness, tears of happiness that fell from the sky. And so we took it as a very blessed moment that it rained on us. But then also later, the sunlight came out. So it was a clear blue skies.
That's so beautiful. That is so beautiful. Well, let's bring Ming into the conversation and talk about The Teacher, a very moving, beautiful film in which, we visually get to experience the character's life as a whole, professionally and personally. There's no escaping the fact that Kevin Chang's entire life was political, as is the fact for many of us who are LGBTQ people. Will you be fired for being LGBTQ? Can you be out and open? What are the cultural and societal barriers that keep us from living our full, true, honest lives? The film was released after Taiwan becomes the first Asian country to legalize same-sex marriage. So, Ming, do you feel that this film also presents to Taiwan and other Asian countries the opportunity to expand and accept LGBTQ issues at large or more widespread?
So, hello, hi. Hi, Michelle, Jay, and everybody. I'm glad to be here. To answer Michelle's question, to be honest, I think every country has its own tradition, culture, and situation, which the path to equality cannot so easily be copied. What I wanted to show in the movie is that the environment of the current Taiwan society and the difficulties the young generation faces, it is largely related to the conflict of older versus younger generation, as well as the authoritarian history of Taiwan and the new young democracy. So what I do is just a detailed and a vivid portrayal of the situation. And even though the country has seemed to take a huge step forward, but not everyone and not the system is all ready for that. Hence, it makes the conflict more personal and more painful. Because now you are dealing with people who are close to you, people you know, and you don't want to destroy your relationship with all those people who are close to you just because you have to be yourself. I think that's more of Asian society thinking. But then I do hope that is a good example. It can be done. It's not easy, and it takes a lot of pain and bravery. But just like what Taiwan shows, it can be done.
Mm-hmm. It can be done. And that's the beauty of telling LGBTQ stories. We have the courage, the bravery, the resilience. So let's jump into, I mentioned it earlier, it's been a year now since marriage equality has passed in Taiwan. And so what has changed? If we can talk a little bit about the landscape now, I mean, how many couples have gotten married, or what's been the reaction? Hopefully it's quelled down a little bit from the opposing side, but would love to hear both your thoughts, and we'll begin with Jay.
Okay. Oh, I forgot to mention earlier, Michelle, that I apologize that the director Sophia could not be here. She had a rush project that she could not get away from, so you're stuck with the producer instead of the director, but hopefully I can be sufficient in answering some of the questions that you had earlier. As to what happened after the passage of the marriage equality, well, overall, a lot has happened. I mean, now we're all working from home or significant parts of the world. We are suffering through unprecedented economic sort of uncertainty. So definitely that has loomed more above and beyond kind of like the LGBT issues, but and also our cross-strait relations with China. So there's a lot of other pressing issues that are now occupying the majority of the Taiwanese people's time. Whereas I would say last year, the focus was a significant focus was on the LGBT sort of passage and legislation. But the anti-gay camp has always said if this legislation passed, then the sky would fall and people would start marrying cars and stuff like that. Obviously, or like there would be, devastation, apocalypse that would happen in Taiwan. That obviously never came to fruition, and that never was something that any like normal people were afraid of, and so that's proven the case. And so a lot of the arguments, whether absurd or like semi-logical, have just started to whittle away, whether from a religious point of view, from a cultural point of view, or from a political point of view. And so the sort of opposition voice is getting a little bit, it's disappearing slowly. There's still pockets. For example, there are very adamant, oftentimes Christian parents that are trying to affect the education sort of curriculum, sometimes down to the individual school level through the parent-teachers sort of association. But overall, I think the course for this law to stay and for Taiwan to be even more sort of progressive and accepting for diversity and inclusion is on that right trajectory. There are thousands of people who have married since the sort of the passage. I can't tell you the number, but definitely I get invitations to weddings often, and I have friends who are coming back from overseas to get married. This is like Taiwanese Americans who are living overseas who finally can come to Taiwan and get duly married, transnational partners getting married, people getting married after just not knowing each other for so long, and also people who have been together, couples who have been together for decades, finally getting married. So it's kind of like, a very joyous moment still.
I totally understand that. First year we had marriage equality, federal marriage equality here in the United States. It was like every month I was getting an invitation for a wedding. I was like, I'm going broke. I really can't go to all your weddings. We had to figure out a way. Ming, what are your thoughts on how Taiwan has changed? Perhaps maybe talking about some structural changes, or even just the religious sector or corporations and societal acceptance.
Well, I have a number here. I did a little bit of research. 1 year after the marriage equality, that's up to this year in May, there were totally 4,000 plus couples registered, and 70% of them are female. So there's like a big difference between male and female couples registered for marriage, and I think that's due to cultural, society, values. That's all I have to add in.
Yeah. Well, that day in which we can gather again and have big, large celebrations. I'm sure that Pride celebration in Taiwan after marriage equality is passed, it's just might be be the biggest, definitely maybe the biggest in Asia. Let's move into a conversation about feeling confident. I know that for a fact, after marriage equality for us, even if you weren't ready to get married, it was about acknowledging that you were a little bit more equal in the eyes of everyone else and how you were treated. Are LGBTQI Taiwanese people more confident? They're coming out more. more LGBTQI prominent cultural structures in place, such as spaces that are open and inviting, or events and festivals that are now trying to be much more inclusive. What are your thoughts, Jay?
So I have several examples that I maybe point out. So the marriage law passed in May, and the Taipei Pride celebration took place last year in October. And that year we had a banner turnout of over 250 or to around 300,000 people that participated in the Pride. And obviously, it's kind of hard to imagine that happening this year because people are not really traveling and because of COVID. But that was like a highlight and kind of like the highest point of the LGBT community and kind of like the general mainstream society coming together to celebrate. That year, Taipei Pride took place on the major boulevard of Taipei called Zhongxiao Donglu. So that's the equivalent of like maybe Market Street or Fifth Avenue in New York, Market Street in San Francisco or Fifth Avenue in New York. And the parade started from the Taipei City Hall and ended at Presidential Hall. That's never been done before. And that was really kind of like a moment where the Taiwanese people, and especially the LGBT community, realized that that really time has come for us to be even more visible and just be proud of who we are and to be counted. Last year during Pride, we had a float promoting our service, and I remember being on top of the float and seeing people of all colors, because people came from all over the world to celebrate with Taiwan that year. And so that I thought would continue to escalate in terms of people attending, but obviously this year is very different. The other significant example that I can cite, being a gay dad myself, what happens to couples when they marry? Not all, but often they start thinking about starting a family. And so I am noticing a lot more gay parents or lesbian parents or LGBT families who are wanting to be counted, because I'm part of the LGBT Family Association as well. And also a lot of intended parents are reaching out to us to see how, whether it's through surrogacy or IVF or adoption, they might be able to start their own families. And so that surge is quite significant. In fact, next month, we are co-organizing the Men Having Babies conference here for the second year in a row in Taipei. Even though, with the COVID situation, not everyone can come, but for example, we did this last year and we had people from 15 different countries who came and attended, and was one of the biggest turnouts for Men Having Babies all around the world. So just two examples of how things are really changing for the better here in Taiwan.
Ming? Any thoughts to add in terms of perhaps, and it could be a feeling, because I certainly did feel it, even though I may not have had facts to back it up, or, but anecdotally, just within my own, social circle or hearing of others, that people felt much more confident after marriage equality passed. People were coming out more, and there was just much more visibility. LGBTQ flags in certain places that maybe never even posted them. So if you'd like to add anything to that, to the cultural spaces that might be much more inclusive than they had been in the past.
I think what Jay was saying was really thorough. What I knew was a lot of friends that were, some are kind of interesting that they start to really consider if they could get married earlier, and some are just like, very it starts to give people pressure, like when you can get married now, and people were just like, oh, where's my husband? Where's my husband?
Yeah. 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 Oh gosh. Yeah. That first year marriage equality came out, I wasn't ready to get married, so I had to make that known to some relationships. But I am married now, and
Oh,
let's
congrats.
move on to films while we have you, Ming. I want to talk about how the arts and the film industry might have changed. Are there more opportunities now to produce films with LGBTQ storylines? Because marriage equality might have opened up, a much higher social acceptance rate. Are filmmakers excited about pushing a little bit for audience to embrace depictions of Taiwanese LGBTQ culture and visibility? In The Teacher, I'll be honest with you, and this might have been, the Asian in me in certain scenes where I was quite surprised, a little thrown off, but we were including that, although very authentic to LGBTQ lives, such as HIV/AIDS and sex, and being open about it.
Right. One of my initial idea to make this movie was to really portray what younger generation now they face in Taiwan. And since that there was so much difference of now as like 30 years ago, I really want to see, the new generation when what are the difficulties they're facing, and not because not only on their personal family relationship, also their career, what they have to face when they come out of the closet.
Jay, feel free to jump into this question too. I mean, as a producer, one of the things is that's very important is getting the film financed, and what has that been like? Are filmmakers much more open to access to resources to getting our LGBTQ stories out there?
So LGBT filmmaking in Taiwan is definitely blossoming. And I think it's becoming a special niche that the sort of Taiwanese film community or the sort of audiovisual community is kind of like fine tuning, because you can't really produce this type of LGBT stories in many other parts of Asia. And so a lot of the filmmakers in other parts of Asia where it would be difficult to get their LGBT project financed or distributed are coming to Taiwan and finding partners, whether it's creative partners or financing partners or distribution partners here. So that's kind of like on a regional side. Like, for example, next month, we're doing our first Taiwan BL series. And we are constantly getting pitches and decks from the Philippines for all types of projects, whether that will be shorts, series, documentaries, or films. Within Taiwan itself, since the situation with COVID here in Taiwan is relatively well under control, the cinemas are open. And because of the sort of like lack of content from Hollywood, there's a strong push to push local films onto the cinema. And this year, there are no less than 4 LGBT films that will be theatrically released. And one is a pretty wide release called Engrave Your Name Here. Another one is about gay parents, also by a very well-known straight ally director. Third one is by the world-renowned Zero Zhou, like a lesbian filmmaker, and taking lesbian sort of storytelling to include suspense and thriller elements as well. And definitely very sensual, like very sexual and very sensual. And the fourth one is a Taiwan-Malaysian co-production featuring a pretty top cast, where one of the straight ally actors in his mid-40s is playing a transgender woman. So you have a gay, lesbian, BL, and transgender films all getting theatrically released. The different cinema releases, but all theatrically released. On the cinema side, that's pretty impressive. And on the sort of series side, because now it's all about streaming, you have all these streamers and all these TV channels talking about how they can incorporate, even if it's a minor character or a side character, into their series, whether it be like, romantic soap operas or crime series, etc. And some of these series are even straight on headlining with LGBT characters. So this is how culturally it's kind of like blossoming and renaissancing. And this content is resonating not just in Taiwan, but also in other parts of the world as well, because it's a very fresh of breath air in terms of content that perhaps weren't really focused on, but now becoming quite visible.
Thank you so much for that. It is extremely exciting, and talking about Taiwan and being able to see how all the activism, the advocacy led up to the change, and how this is also impacting society. So the one big question that I had was what your thoughts were, and how Taiwan and being the first country to pass marriage equality, and then moving forward and progressing, continuing to do so, how that may impact other Asian countries. And for example, I was just reading just a few weeks ago that Thailand may be next in moving baby steps in the direction of marriage equality. But would love to hear your thoughts.
In terms of lawmaking or legislation, definitely the LGBT activists here are connecting with activists in other parts of Asia actively to see how we can help them with strategy and the support so that they can advance their own sort of equality agenda and campaigns there that include countries like Thailand, Vietnam, Japan, Hong Kong. And so there's a lot of active sharing of information and experience going on that aspect. And in terms of culturally, I think and not just filmmaking, also maybe music and publishing or other arts are trying to find ways where they can sort of cross-pollinate ideas and try to make the content travel a little bit wider and try to make the content be a little bit more relevant, since the LGBT community exists everywhere, that through collaboration and through co-production and through brainstorming, there could be content that can travel well throughout the LGBT community, throughout Asia, or throughout the world. Mm-hmm. So actually, there's a lot of discussion on how to collaborate together on all sectors of the art industry.
It makes me feel like, they're very hopeful. I guess the word is hopeful, considering all that we're going through, as not just as a country, wherever you live, but the world is experiencing all of this, together. And so I know that we're trying to power through this talk. I'll just go straight into the last question, which is about kind of what you want the world to take from not just the films that you have been involved with, Taiwan Equals Love, or even The Teacher, but the fact that we are going through, pandemic. There are growing voices, younger generations who feel empowered to fight for a cause that they believe in, that they're organizing, to Jay's point, not necessarily just within their friends, but an entire network that they connect with globally. But what would you like, for the world to take out of the films that we've talked about tonight, and also the progress, the change that you're putting out there in the world?
So I made it part of the corporate mission for my company, Portico Media, and my personal mission to highlight the visibility of the LGBT community, and also to put out as much LGBT storytelling as possible, so that these stories can resonate in all parts of the world. So that's why several years ago I started Asia's first LGBT streaming service called Gaga Ulala. which currently has over 1,500 videos from all over the world, with 70% comprising of content coming from Asia, which is really impressive. We really looked hard into all corners of Asia to find those precious shorts, series, documentaries, and features. And Taiwan Equals Love is one of the 34 originals that we have done to also add to that collection. So I hope in the future that the streaming service and our production arm, Gold Studios, can assist and collaborate more with directors, producers, actors, financiers, sponsors, corporations from all over the world who want to put the money where their mouth is and create more of these stories that can help elevate the situation for LGBT people all throughout the world, and not necessarily through, you know, ad campaigns or through, you know, commercials, but actually through stories, because I think stories are the ones that will resonate most with the heart and mind, and has the best ability to actually change people's outlook and aspect and attitude towards other people and create compassion, understanding, and kindness. So that's what I hope to continue to do in my line of work.
Ming, do we have you back?
Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Yes.
Yay.
Yes.
Well, one more question, and then we
So
can
sorry.
go. And it's really about, you know, what you want the world to take out of seeing your films and witnessing the progress and the change, the fight for equality.
Yeah, I think that with so many filmmakers are working on new projects, and as well as the path of marriage equality, I think the culture in Taiwan is more prevail that more and more people would accept this idea. However, I think it's not everybody. Just like, you know, we were talking earlier about the other side of people, that they try to oppose the marriage equality bill, and they sort of swear that they want to vote it out of to reverse the bill again. So what I hope was that with more and more culture and movie and all sorts of issues that would make the more people understand and get to realize or to change their point of view.
Thank you so much, Ming and Jay, for this incredible talk, for the beautiful films and the documentary, the documented history of everybody's collective power in fighting for equality. And that is just a huge gift for future generations to come. And hopefully tomorrow will be a better tomorrow than we had anticipated. And so thank you to you both for all that you do. Thank you to Frameline. And of course, thank you to all of you who joined and tuned in with us for this special panel and this discussion. And of course, thank you to the Ministry of Culture, Taiwan Academy in Los Angeles. We'll say goodnight. We'll say goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.